I found myself on the sunny coast and I was feeling great when I saw a busker playing there at Kawana Lake. Bring your mates, for your mates, beers and love music while you're filling up your plates. October is a date, from the 30th to 31st we gonna rock the place. Love is the theme and we'd love to see your face at Buskers by the lake, at Buskers by the lake. Alright, well, Andy Ward, Dr. Andy Ward, welcome to the behind the scenes of the Buskers by the Lake podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. My tutor, a man of many talents, I understand.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't go that far. Man of occasional talent, but not really. Yeah, sure, why not?
In what fields would you describe yourself as occasionally talented?
I guess, my principal kind of profession before I started like working as an academic at a university was music. So, I spent my misspent youth busking, which put me through uni the first time round. And I actually dropped out of uni when I was like in my final year. Never completed my undergraduate degree. Went on to start an internet social media marketplace for creative, intellectual property developers. Then I came back to music and worked for Sony for a while as a recording artist, and now I kind of work as a songwriter and a producer as well for kind of international artists. So that's kind of my gig when I'm not here.
How would you say music's helped you with also your academic career and your other roles? Has music been a big part of your life? Has it been helpful?
Well, yeah, I mean, I played music since I was a little tacker, the tiny little kid, really lucky to have a family that saw music is important. So, and who worked hard enough to have music lessons on the side and stuff. So, it's a really adept kind of way of working, right? So when you work in the gig economy and as a creative practitioner yourself, focusing in kind of journalism and music journalism and the kind of direction you're going in, you kind of cobble together a career to yourself because there's no office. You don't finish your music degree and then turn up to the music office the next day and do your music for 9 to 5, 5 days a week. So creative practitioners work in a really diverse, flexible, crazy hours, sometimes 80 hours in a week, sometimes 5 hours the next week, a kind of really dynamic way. And that's helped me when I joined the university, because university's not much different, which is really weird, right? Yes, we'll get paid to work 9 to 5 at a university, but if you're really dedicated to the process, to research, to kind of building capacity in the region, which is what a university is all about, then you don't kind of sign off at 5 o'clock. I mean, I'm here tonight until 9:30 to put on a community event. It's kind of having that pragmatic and persistent approach has really helped.
I would like to say, just from seeing you in 2 or 3 tutorials for this subject, your ability to communicate academic information, it's almost like watching a musical performance. No joke. When you're riffing with I suppose academic terminology, it's almost like watching someone freestyle rap or play an instrument.
It's me talking to myself too, right? The complex philosophical kind of academic ideas and frameworks and concepts and things we've been talking about, epistemology and pragmatism, and it helps me. I find talking through it and trying to translate it into something that you can eat and digest, that's not this impossible thing to understand. It helps me figure it out too, So the importance of the teaching process at a uni helps us as academics and researchers figure it out what the fuck it is that we're trying to say,
And with this subject, I guess, when we started doing it, I wasn't really sure of what it actually was. Mm-hmm. But now that we're getting into it and I'm here in the studio with you, with Cindy, the organizer of Buskers by the Lake, it's really good to see how that academic work applies to the industry. do you want to sort of talk us through how the university has gotten involved with Buskers by the Lake?
Yeah, love to. I mean, Cindy and I met through another research project that I'm working on. Universities are really interesting places, right? There's in a really predominantly capital-driven world, or like capitalist environments, man. Universities are some of the last places where there's not necessarily that entirely for-profit, model going on, and so you describe it as like a benevolent institution, something that can give back and try to do as little harm and try to do as much good as they can. So hooking up with Cindy and Buskers by the Lake is a no-brainer for us as the School of Business and Creative Industries. Those two things are really similar, business and creative practice, or the industrialization of creativity, creative industries, right? Making stuff to sell, provide a service, a product design to address a community need. They're really hand in glove things. So partnerships like Buskers by the Lake mean I get to hook up a group of students who have similar interests with a creative enterprise, who's actually making, a community difference and running a business and running a creative enterprise that you can see and integrate with and kind of go, yeah, cool. So Cindy's awesome. Like the Jansen gang and the family, the family they've created at Buskers by the Lake is awesome, and what they do is awesome. Their community outcomes are really good. So being able to just connect a bunch of like-minded senior students to work in industry in that way is perfect. It's ideal. Like it's not very often in a job you get to have outcomes where everyone benefits. But you can at a university, and that's kind of why I work here. It's better than the music industry because not very often, not everyone benefits from whatever happens in the music industry.
Well, this is probably for this project, it's been very informative, showing how, you can actually make something but still be creative. Like, you don't have to give up that creativity to still get a job or to still find work. Like, this is the first time I've ever really done a proper podcast or been in a proper studio. But it's great. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, right? Like this idea of making stuff somewhere along the way, and it's only recent. Like it's only in the last 100 years or so that people have become really obsessed with this idea that art and making stuff and creative practice and making money are two polar opposite things, right? It's crazy, and it's actually this really, really clever marketing on the part of youth culture in like post the Second World War in the United States. So you think, right? Rock and roll, youth market, like headphones, vinyl players, the emerging kind of rockabilly and rock and roll culture in the United States by way of like Elvis Presley or any of the people operating in that space. We're all like, yeah, cool, rebels, James Dean, rebel without a cause, yeah. But the actual fact is, like, at the end of the Second World War, the United States was faced with like a whole generation of people who'd been wiped out from the war, and they didn't have a labor force that started at 18 and went to 21. So like fast food and the American kind of industrial system started going, well, I guess we can give people who are like 15 and stuff jobs, and cool. And what happened was, for the first time since the advent of massive marketing, like the capacity to distribute printed and radio-based kind of communication, you had these kids with money for the first time ever. So like up until the 1940s, if your dad was a newspaper man, you were going to grow up and be a newspaper man, and because it was this messed up patriarchy environment, like if mum was a stay-at-home, wife, then the daughter was going to, and it's really messed up. So you'd go home and you'd smoke the same tobacco that your dad smoked, and you'd drink the same drink, and you'd listen to the same radio stations and wear the same clothes. So it wasn't until the 50s, like I'm talking 70 years ago, right? Only like your grandparents remember this shit, where youth culture became a thing because all of a sudden young people had heaps of disposable income. And instead of like talking to dad, the newspaper man, marketing organizations went, what are young people like? I don't know, rock and roll and like transistor radios and roller skates and fast food and shit. So that, I know that's a bit of like a long jabber about some like the history of creative practice.
I love it. I love history.
Like, how that translated was at the same time, the post-World War, there were these philosophers, this guy called Adorno and this other guy called Horkheimer, and they founded this thing called, actually Horkheimer, I think, founded the Frankfurt School, and they coined this term, the culture industries. And it was like a critique of how we use money and create things to create like identities and nation state identities and ideas of ourselves and stuff. So the whole idea, like that was there 70 years ago, is when we started separating out the idea that money, man, is like it corrupts art and music and like making things. They're the first things that start differentiating us from the rest of the primates and animals. Like other apes don't make transistor radios, but we do. Right? And we started making tools. We started making like complex language systems and started like thinking about the universe around us. That's creative, right? And that happened for 250,000 years up until 70 years ago when someone was like, yeah, I don't know, man, making money and like making things, I don't know if they're the same thing. And they definitely are. Like Apple's got no problem being like, yeah, we're slick. We wear turtlenecks and we make really wicked devices and it does cool stuff. But hey, don't like paint a picture and ask for money because that will corrupt the picture. It's insanity, right? So that's my gig, is to try and express that it's okay to want to have a meaningful, financially sustainable, and dare I say profitable career out of making stuff. We don't have problems with like plumbers who do that. No one looks at a plumber and goes, oh man, I don't know, you asking for me to pay this bill's fundamentally corrupting the creativity of your plumbing practice.
Your pipe work.
That's insane, right?
Yeah.
But for a journalist or for like a songwriter or for someone in visual communication, we find it really hard, right? Like, do you find it hard to like ask for credibility or money or like, you know, when you engage in making something?
I've finally wrapped my head around it as I've sort of got more confident and met people like you and gone through uni.
Yeah.
But through high school, they sort of say you can get like a trade or you can get like an office job.
Yeah.
And then if you want to be one of those sort of out there creative people, good for you, but like you're not going to go too far in life.
Yeah.
And that sort of really ingrained itself in my mentality. And we were speaking about this earlier today. I started with a law degree, went to an education degree, and now I've switched to journalism.
Yeah.
But now from journalism, I'm sort of getting into the music side of it where I finally want to be. But before now, I really didn't think that was possible. I didn't think that there was any point chasing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, because of what I was told and like what
It's
you
amazing,
learn
isn't
through
it?
the education system.
So there's some...
I think how many people out there have like with talent and potential have not used that or not expressed it to the world because they didn't think it was viable. Like,
Well, totally, right? And how many people who are making or doing, right, creating things, how many of them are out there doing stuff that's not in the same vein or the same technique or whatever as other people doing incredible stuff but aren't accepted because the education system says you have to do it this way. So like Jimi Hendrix famously played the guitar left-handed and upside down, right? One of the greatest and most influential guitarists of the last, of the history of the instrument pretty much, right? So imagine if you sent him to school and they're like, oh, young James Hendrix, I don't know if that's the way you hold the guitar. You should learn to do it the other way. So there's that kind of innovation in approach that happens that can just be quashed by this idea of like the cookie cutter job thing. And there ain't nothing wrong with it. Like ain't nothing against someone who like wants to go work in a accounting firm or a legal firm and do 9 to 5, and that's amazing, right? And in terms of probably like a work-life balance, it might even be healthier, right? But at the end of the day, those people go home and they watch films, they listen to music, they want to hang art on their walls, they play with devices that have been, designed by intelligent people to make sure the user interfaces are brilliant. They rely heavily in the quality of their life is dependent on all the other people making the things that they enjoy, like including the milk bottle container, and the label on it. Like that whole process is so rich, and it's such a huge industry. It's one of the largest things that generate money. Is the idea that awesome jacket, right, and this microphone and that sign have all been made by people, and people have interacted and exchanged money and value for it.
Can I just say, this jacket, as far as money goes, was an absolute bargain. It cost $50 and a box of chocolates from to a lovely old lady.
I desperately want to know that story.
Yeah.
Like, how did if you were like, it cost $50 and I got it from a thrift shop, I'd be like, yeah, okay, but how does the box of chocolates fit into it?
So my mum, she's massively creative too, and she was with the local theatre company.
Yeah.
And one of the old ladies who sewed for them, I needed a graduation jacket, and mum was like, I actually designed it. So we picked the materials out. We paid for the materials. Then we give it to this lovely old lady, and she said, oh, no, don't pay me. I don't want anything for it. And we're like, we got to give you something. So, yeah. But that old lady needs to come to uni and learn that she could make a lot more off it.
Yeah, $50, more like $250.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like, I don't want to get all academic about it, right? But it's a podcast. We may as well talk a little bit about it. But the idea of like labor and how we work in a society, like 9 to 5, hasn't existed for that long. Like about 100 years. Before that, like there's a massive kind of collective bargaining trade union movement that was like, hey, how about we don't work 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, and how about we make sure that 5-year-old kids aren't working in coal mines and stuff, and that's not a very long history, right? Like even if you just go with the idea of Western history, just back to the Dark Ages. Let's go like 1000 AD, right? Let's ignore the thousands and thousands of years of history before that, but that's 1,000 years, right? And only 10% of it we've been like, yeah, so 9 to 5, and like that's what's good for humans, and it doesn't come out of any research or reason or anything, right? It's just like, someone, hey, if we work, rest, and play, like the Mars bar ad, we need how do you chop 24 up into 3 different bits? 8 hours, right? 3 times, yep, cool. That seems about right. 8 hours rest, 8 hours play, 8 hours work, sure. And we're finally at a point. 100 years later, we're looking at cool. So Norway or Sweden are like, what happens if we make it a 4-day working week? And all of a sudden, society's more productive because people get more rest and they want to go to work because they're better rested. And so we're still thinking about these things. There's no hard or fast rules. And it's crazy that the education system has been so... this is how it works. So I'm glad that if my one influence in your life is be critical about all of that stuff and think about what is best for you and what makes you happy and makes you gives you the kind of quality of life that you want. That's all that matters, dude.
Yeah, that's actually amazing. Well, we could also work on music.
We could.
This is just coming to the studio today. This is my first time in a proper studio.
Oh, dude, welcome.
Watching you set it all up and just tapping everything. When you left the room, I was trying to look at the control panel and just understand it.
Yeah.
I've got no idea, but
awesome. Well, that's half of what we teach you, right?
Yeah.
Well, music, dude. You rap, right? You make your own beats and stuff.
Not at this stage, no. Not at this stage.
We have to fix that, right?
Yeah.
We have to get you making your own beats.
Yeah.
What are you listening to at the moment? What do you think of the new? Have you listened to the new Kanye record?
Donda, the hot topic in the world.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of not a Kanye fan, but a Kanye appreciator.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like him as a person or everything he does, but just the way he's like made his art into something more than music. Like, it's not just music at this point. It's like a cult and a whole experience.
Yep.
And I think that you can't help but appreciate it. Like,
Totally.
it's the first album to go number one in all like 130 countries on Apple.
Yeah.
So he's obviously doing the right thing. If we measure it by money, if we're measuring music by like money, as we were talking
monetary
about
success.
before,
For
then
sure.
Kanye is the greatest of all
Kanye
time.
Is killing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. You describe yourself as a Kanye appreciator, and you're not necessarily a fan of the dude.
Or the rapping, like,
But-
as far as his verses go, I'd rather listen to Hilltop Hoods or Bliss and Esso.
Yep.
They're just wordplay and skill. I find a lot more
Yep.
creative and easy to listen to. But as far as art and creativity, then Kanye is one of the best.
No, I couldn't agree more, man. Like, whether I totally personally disagree with his politics, right? And clearly Kanye has some pretty significant health and well-being issues that he fluctuates through in his public, like, facing life, which probably ain't great for the dude, But what he does is what good things that are made, right? Good art. I actually really don't like the word art, but we can get into that later. What good art does, right? It's not about like this. You can't make something that everyone on the face of the planet will love. You can't, right? The Beatles still hold the most number one songs ever written, Lennon and McCartney. And yet 50% of the people just in the country they're from, like, I prefer the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Like, it's literally the highest selling or the greatest version of anything. You can't make this thing that exists. You can't even make an idea, right, that everyone's going to agree with. But we put these, like, absolutely bonkers parameters on ourselves as creatives. It's like, it's got to be perfect. No, it really doesn't, right? Like, what it's about is making something that makes people react to it.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, when I was like a bit younger and working like in my early career in music, it was all about making the audience and the people happy. I made a thing, and if people like it, then I like it. Like, cool. And you get in this like crazy headspace where you're constantly going, well, what can I make that people are going to like? No. But the reality is, right, it's not about making everyone like it. It's about making people engage with it, talk. Like, take Taylor Swift, right? Someone who, like, because I'm a pop tragic, obviously I love the music of Taylor Swift, just like I love the music of Kanye West. But people love hating on Taylor. But when it's like down to a situation where it's like you and me, and we're at a party on a Friday night, a few beers in, chilling on the couch at the back, when we're talking about whether or not we like Taylor Swift, the only person who's won in this global cultural conversation in that is Taylor Swift, right? Taylor Swift ain't at home sitting on her couch going like, wonder what Kieran and Andy are doing.
Not yet.
Like, no one cares, right?
Yeah.
So it's the capacity for that stuff that's made to make people talk about it. That's the greatness of making things. It's not about making something perfect that everyone's going to agree with. You can't. It's actually impossible. But if you make stuff that makes people react, that's the real secret. And that's why when people like, we've all heard like someone critique modern art, and like there's a painting and it's like a black house painted canvas and someone's called it white. And it hangs in the National Gallery, and people go, that's just ridiculous. I could have done that. It's like, yeah, but you didn't. And you engaging with it, you going, I'm outraged. Maybe that's the point, man. And like, it's like wall hanging clickbait, or like wall hanging shock jock stuff. It's like stuff to make you go, what the hell, man? So,
Just on that, I think I'm a journalism student. And a lot of what they teach you in the journalism degree is like the ideal of journalism.
Yep.
This is how you report fairly. Don't do this, don't do that. But in reality, you go on your phone and you look at the big news sites.
Yeah, yeah.
They're just doing clickbait.
Dude, I know,
And
right?
I think journalism's sort of coming around to that position that you just spoke about with music. Like, it's not about making the best journalism or writing the most in-depth stories. It's just about making people react.
Exactly, and that's where whoa, you hit on something massive, right? Which is the difference between, you talked about the ideal of journalism, which is like fair and balanced reporting and honesty and transparency in the process, and you yourself are like, yeah, I don't reckon that's what's happening, hey. And that's the difference between like what we use stuff for. So we like less than 20 years ago, we used the news to read the news, to stay informed about what was happening in our society. That purpose has been kind of usurped with this idea that it should be entertainment. No, this is boring. Like, what? When did that happen? When so as a result, people who make the news have like started working to this paradigm where it's like, well, actually we need to reformat the news and make it more interesting and like engaging and make it, there should be more opinions. No, man, there really shouldn't be more opinions. Certainly ones that aren't declared, you know, like, it's fascinating to see what's happened because overall, as an academic thinker, right, one of the things that I am really thinking hard about and writing about and reading about at the moment is the idea of how we use stuff. We get really caught up in what something is, right? Is it journalism? Is it art? Is it a cool jacket? But what we should actually be more concerned about is like, what does it do? Do you feel awesome when you wear that jacket? Well, yes. Well, then it's an awesome jacket, right? And when we start critiquing things about definition, like that is or it isn't art, like that painting on the wall at the National, that's not art, right? Or that's not journalism. There can only be two outcomes in the way we talk, right? Which is like, well, yeah, it is. No, it's not. But yeah, it is. No, it's not, right? But what we should be talking about is what it does. And what it does in journalism, when a journalist is like, so if I make like a misleading headline that's going to make a ton of people click here, I will make money. But I might be corrupting what you've literally learned at university is the ideal of journalism. Then like that's what we should be worried about. We shouldn't be worried about whether or not it is or it isn't entertaining. We should be worried about what it does. And what it does is like not great things for the reputation of the media, of journalism, and like the creative industries in general, right? Yeah, this got real academic and real deep real quick. Sorry.
Yeah.
Should we talk about more lighthearted things?
I don't know how to bring it back to. I don't know how to bring it back now. I'm thinking about question everything. I've just had an existential crisis.
Oh, great, man! That's one of my favorite.
That's
my
what we
favorite
want.
things about this gig
Yeah.
is the existential crisis I get to cause.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, dude. It's really interesting because like we've kind of been robbed of this idea of our responsibility as people that make stuff because we're worried about whether or not it is good. And that's a bonkers way to think about the things that we make. Like, it doesn't really matter whether or not it is subjectively good or bad, right? And these notions of valuing, oh, that's a good song. Oh, that's a great piece of design, right? We should be worried about what that song does, what that piece of design does. Because that's when we start asking way cooler questions like, well, is it ethical? Who's it helping? Does it hurt people? Like, what do we, and thinking about things in that way is a way more interesting and a way more engaged way to think about creative practice. And I think it's because we cram creative practice into this like maths and science box. It's like, well, 1 and 1 is 2, right? Unless you talk to like some crazy theoretical mathematicians like Bertrand Russell who are like, oh, I have is it? But for the most part, we're worried about whether or not it is or it isn't music, or it is or it isn't journalism, or it is or it isn't, it is or it isn't bad or good. When we should be being like, well, actually, the world's probably not like black and white and crazy and binary. Like there's this whole bunch of nuance in everything that we do. So we can worry about like, okay, who uses this thing that we make, that we design? Is it for a good? Is it for like a morally like positive outcome, or like what does it do in society? Is I think is probably a more important question about creative practice, and it's just from this idea that like, oh yeah, science is the only way to think about stuff. Science and maths and engineering and hey man, I love science and I love maths and I love modern medicine and I definitely like living in a well-engineered building and I love this computer right here I definitely couldn't build with my technical knowledge. But, what we use that computer for and who lives in the building, that's way more important.
Yeah. I think to bring it back to Buskers by the Lake.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea.
Yeah. It's a really good festival for promoting arts on the coast and giving a diverse range of artists a chance to show themselves off. Like, they haven't just said it's musicians or it's just one thing. They've given a lot of people a chance to come here and show their skills to a wide range of people. Yeah. And I understand you might be performing.
Apparently I am performing in the program somewhere. That'll be cool. That'll be great. I haven't busked for years. I think I said earlier, right? Like I grew up busking. When I was 16, I kind of, like many 16-year-old people, probably wasn't the best kid. Didn't get along very well with my family, so I kind of, moved out and back in and out and back in and all, The whole time I like got myself a busker's license, played in the Queen Street Mall in Brisbane, paid all my rent, paid all my bills, like took care of myself through that. And that as a starting place for performers, no matter what they are, right? Whether they're musicians or actors or whatever, right? Anyone who's willing to get up on the street, essentially, and put a little box out in front of them and say, I'm going to do a thing, and would you give me money for that? That's a really healthy thing to do, and it's so challenging because you don't have a captive audience. Like, no one's asked you, no one's gone, hey man, why you go stand on the street corner and like spit some rhymes at me? You literally chosen to kind of do it out of nowhere. So learning how to engage with an audience, learning that there's an immediate money feedback for like, for what you're doing, is pretty interesting. And this is just a great thing for the Sunny Coast, right? To give a whole collection of performers of all different kinds a platform to come and engage in that practice and learn more about themselves and learn more about the region and kind of at a community grassroots level promote their work. It's a great platform.
Yeah. And to promote the idea of busking, to like say, when you see someone you appreciate, give them money. Like, it is a good thing, A lot of people probably just walk past, but someone who's putting themselves out there that much should be rewarded for it, I reckon, or definitely, yeah.
Totally, right?
Yeah.
It's a busk. It's a really weird. I can't imagine. So it was like 20 years ago when I busked, and everyone had cash. I have I can't remember the last time I had cash on me. So that'd be rough for the modern busker. You got to get yourself like a little like pay pass thing or something.
Yeah.
So that's. God, I sound ancient. No, it's like 20 years ago, everything was cash, and I can't imagine. God, I'm old. How terrible! What an awful thing to find out on a podcast with you, dude. But yeah, it's a pretty cool idea that they've come up with to put all of these people together and play around and kind of experiment in that space.
I suppose touching on that, they're kind of keeping the art of busking alive. Because the system is you'll get your ticket, but then as part of that ticket price, you get tokens to hand out to the buskers and pay them. And as you said, a lot of people these days don't even carry cash. So it's an opportunity for these artists who busk to have a cash paying crowd as well. And yeah, so it's definitely going to be supporting a lot of artists.
Yeah,
Which is a good
absolutely.
thing.
And in pretty hard times too, right? You know, like the music industry in Australia is worth like 1.2 billion bucks. Roughly 800-ish million of that is made up of the live music sector in Australia. And in the last 18 months through COVID-19, man, that has been reduced to about 89 million bucks. So that's a 90% reduction in the value of an entire sector of the music industry.
That's just, that's ridiculous.
And a lot of those people didn't qualify for support because, you know, like gigging musicians aren't necessarily always the best at like reporting their income, so they can go and be like, hey, yeah, like, I don't think anyone was planning, I know, in 6 months' time there'll be a global pandemic and I'll have my tax in order so that I can go get some government support, right? So there's a lot of people suffering out there and finding it really hard and finding it really difficult, particularly live performers, finding it really difficult to articulate what they do into a digital world. It's cool for those of us who were like already there and already doing stuff or have the technical knowledge and also like the actual privilege and money involved in setting yourself up digitally. But for those people who just perform live and have been living off that, stuff like this is amazing because it's a reintroduction of the audience and, you know, financial support that's really badly needed.
It's a bit controversial, but touching back on what we spoke about, how at school the government pushes trades and like scientific or mathematical knowledge as the only forms of knowledge. That's been demonstrated in this past year because the government obviously hasn't been as quick to help out the music industry. It shows that they don't actually prioritize the value of arts. And like, yeah,
it's, well, I mean, there's no other industry on earth outside of the creative practice industry where if someone came to your house and provided a service, you'd be like, cool, so like a beer and pizza is cool, right? That's, or like you come to my house, and I have a lot of people that come to my house, so it's like an opportunity for you to get exposure for like your cabinet making if you build me a kitchen. No one would do that. But there's a sense, it's that devaluation that we were talking about before, this kind of expectation that creativity will exist and that people should do it for the love of it. Yeah. You can't pay your rent on the love of it. You know, trust me, I know. So, it is about, events like this are about changing community understanding that supporting creative practice is an essential part of society and community. And like what's the point? Like what is the point in living in a society that doesn't have like good music and good food and good like stuff to do and good film and good culture and good games, and like that's the real stuff that makes us proud of who we are as individuals, proud of who we are as a culture, and like have a real strong sense of community. So I think like the more we can change that through events like this, the better.
Because that's the reason people work, to spend the money they've earned on the creative stuff.
You got it.
And yeah, I think it'd be a great opportunity for everybody on the Sunshine Coast to come down on the 30th and the 31st of October and support all our creatives in Queensland, because it has been a hard year, but yeah. And then it's amazing that I've been able to get involved with this now through your work and meet Cindy, who's organised this. Yeah, just a great opportunity.
That's what it's all about, man. Like bringing people together to make and do stuff. It's good.
Making stuff happen. Yeah. Any final words or shout outs you'd like to give?
Just to like Buskers by the Lake for being awesome to work with, for doing amazing work in the community, to you student, University of the Sunshine Coast student gang working on this project. You guys are awesome. Like you're very introducing students to industry partners is always a touch and go process, and you guys have taken to it really well. So like It's awesome work.
As I
I
said,
can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, as I said in the Cindy interview, this is pretty much the first uni assignment I've actually been excited about. Yeah, no, but yeah,
Well, I'm glad.
it's great.
I'm glad.
It's
I'm
great.
glad it's
yeah.
helping and it's good.
Yeah.
Wicked. All right. Well,
So yeah, thank you, Andy Ward,
thanks for having
for
me,
coming
man.
on. Yeah, it's been very informative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see you at the
At
festival.
Buskers by the Lake, I'll be
Right.
there
Awesome.
in the pink jacket.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I was getting down to like 7%, and I was like,
Uh-oh.
Yeah. We got it. That was very interesting, but
sorry.
Sorry, yes, she's talk to an idiot about academic
I
shit.
think
It's like,
at Buskers by the Lake, at Buskers by the Lake, at Buskers by the Lake, Buskers by the Lake, at Buskers by the Lake, at Buskers by the Lake.